Welcome back to the Lights Out podcast, bedtime stories for boys and girls around the world. Good evening, boys and girls. Are you ready for bed? Are you all snuggled up and ready for another Lights Out bedtime story? Well, you're in for a treat tonight because we have a book called Spaghetti with the Yeti by Adam and Charlotte Guillian. And this was shortlisted for the Roald Dahl Funny Prize in 2013. Once upon a time, a boy called George had an excellent plan to go and discover the Yeti. He put on his backpack, a warm woolly hat, and a map and a tin of spaghetti. Slowly, George climbed up a steep mountain path in search of the mystical beast, when he stumbled straight into the monster, who was eating a sumptuous feast. "Hooray!" shouted George. "I knew you'd be here. I'm sure that you must be the Yeti." The monster stood up with a furious gaze. "Are you crazy? My name is Betty." "So sorry, Betty," said George with a smile, "but I'm taking the Yeti some lunch." "In that case, you'll want to take some of these bones, for the Yeti likes food with a crunch." So George climbed on up to the steep mountain path to track down the hideaway brutes, when he stumbled upon a big monster with a face like a battered old boot. "Yippee!" shouted George. "I've tracked you down now. I've been searching so long for the Yeti." The monster glared down with an angriest growl. "How insulting! My name is Yeti." "So sorry, Yeti," said George with a sigh, "but I'm taking the Yeti a treat." "In that case, you'll want to take one of these goats, for the Yeti likes food with a bleat." So George trudged on up to the steep mountain path, dragging the goat by her tail, when he spotted a shape in the distance and heard the most bone-chilling wail. "Hurrah!" shouted George. "At last it is you! I've been looking so hard for the Yeti." The monster looked down with a horrible howl. "Are you bonkers? My name is Nettie." "I'm so sorry, Nettie," sighed George, feeling glum, "but I'm taking the Yeti a snack." "In that case, you'll want to take lobsters and crabs, for the Yeti likes food with a crack." So George plodded on up to the steep mountain path. The difficult climb made him puff. Exhausted, he threw himself down on the ground. "That's it," he cried. "I've had enough." As George sat despondent, his head in his hands, a shadow fell over the place. He felt something hairy, a prod on the back, and then turned and peered up at a face. "I found you!" cried George with a big happy grin, and he showed all of his gifts to the Yeti. But the monster looked down at the crab and the goat and said, "Sorry, I just eat spaghetti." "I knew it," said George with a whoop of delight, and he opened up the battered old tin. Then he tipped out the spaghetti out into the bowl, and George and the Yeti tucked in. The end of Spaghetti with the Yeti by Adam and Charlotte Guillian, here on the Lights Out podcast, bedtime stories for boys and girls, and you guessed it, Yetis that like spaghetti. Good night.